Hi guys, it's Andy. Today I'll be looking at the book The Things She Owned by author Katherine Tamiko Arguile. I happened to find this book before COVID put Melbourne into our second lockdown, which thankfully we're coming out of now. I went into one of the local bookshops, and they had certain books wrapped up with themes or not quite what the books were about. It was like a mystery guest book you could buy, and this one said Japan and family secrets. And obviously, I do like a lot of stories and the culture of Japan, so that had me curious. And family secrets is always a bit juicy as well when it comes to a book. So I purchased it, and out came this particular book. This story is about a mother and daughter relationship. With Erica is the daughter. She's half Japanese, half Western lineage, though who that Western father was is a matter of part of the story, a mystery of some elements of the story. And her mother Machiko, who was kind of grew up, at the end of World War II, and her life story. And it's about their conflicted relationship with each other, and how that forms. It takes place in kind of over Japan and also London as well, because Erica, as an adult, works as a chef in London, and also that there's elements that take place in Hong Kong. And it's just this idea of looking at this fractured relationship based on items that the mother owned. Because at the beginning, when we're with an adult Erica, the daughter, her mother has recently passed away, and Erica hasn't kind of really made peace with that yet. Hasn't It's like she's being haunted by this specter of her mother, and only by the story and going through the story and understanding and seeing how that all works, do you understand why their relationship has been so fractured throughout their lives, and why Erica is finding it potentially difficult to lay the spirit of her mother to rest in many regards. In particular, there's really great descriptions and looks at what was happening to ordinary Japanese citizens during the end of World War II. Machiko, the mother, is only a small child during the bombings of Japan by America, and the kind of starvation that was happening amongst people. There's a sad moment where she's playing with her siblings when they're children, and they're like pretending to eat dirt and pretending it's like a different type of food, because there's so few food due to the war and everything like that. And there's a great memory revolving around an object of a small doll and her interaction with an American soldier that just was really great, and being the way it was described, and how it affects her, and the fact that she kind of keeps it all through her adulthood. And in one memory, the daughter Erica, when Erica's a child, plays with the doll and accidentally damages it, and this throws Machiko into a rage about it. But she never explains that to her daughter, and I think the whole kind of part of the book is trying to say that when you don't speak to each other about your emotions, about how you're feeling, and it's very hard. Like her mother, coming from that post-war Japan, and post-war people coming from those kind of areas where you've seen desperate, been in desperate situations, and you've seen things at their worst. Must be a lot of psychological drama for that, which maybe when you're growing up and you're a teenager, as Erica finds, that you just want to be able to understand your parent, and never can, I guess, to a certain extent, or not until you yourself start experiencing life as well. So, and that dynamic is really great, because it's almost like there's a little bit of an element going through the novel where Erica feels like she's almost haunted by the spirit of her mother, not in a kind of necessarily ghosty kind of way, but by, think she's seeing herself, and it all kind of gets kicked off because Erica's cousin is visiting London from Japan, and Erica is upset that she hasn't done anything with her own mother's, and turned them into an altar, and done this kind of Japanese blessings thing that she's meant to have done years ago when her mum initially died. And so Erica's worried about her cousin's judgment, worried about what the family would think, but also it's too painful for her to she had an antagonistic relationship with her mother, and then her mother passed away. The illustrations that begin each section, as I said, each chapter and narrative is tied to the items of her mother's that Erica hasn't looked at yet after her death. And you've got these really great black and white drawings, like sketches really almost, that look at these items and what they meant as well. And it has like this little description of what it is as well and how it's used, which is absolutely lovely, and I think is a really strong piece, because by tying it to those items together, and a lot of these items are really practical items, and the items that maybe should have been thrown out long ago, but they have such memory and love, a complicated love tied to them, because this mother and daughter relationship, as it's described, is really hard for them to work through and deal with. It's like the mother's dealing with a lot of trauma from the war, and also wanting to be a certain kind of woman in this age where there was a lot of, in Japan, even back then, there wasn't a lot of liberation for women to be who they wanted and do what they wanted to do. Food is such a big part of this novel and this story as well. There's a lot of lengthy passages. Obviously, the main character Erica is a chef, but also in the narrative to do with her mother, who's not a chef but a really good cook. Descriptions of food, how they're prepared, how they're eaten, how they're used, because food, I think, is like, especially when someone makes you food, or when someone teaches you something about how to make food, there's a kind of tradition that is almost spiritual to a certain extent. At least that's how it feels like it's being portrayed in this novel, by the fact that Erica becomes a chef as she grows up, and is a chef at when we first meet her at the beginning of the novel, when we don't even know anything about her and haven't delved into her backstory yet. It's lovingly talked about as a way of her channeling aspects of a relationship with her mother that she wished she had. Like it's only when they were cooking food or preparing food or eating food together that there was some kind of peace between mother and daughter while Erica was growing up. Which is quite sad, because like obviously their relationship was so strained, and Erica didn't know her mother's past and what was going on in her mother's head. And Michiko, she had a hard life, and she had difficulty, and she made some choices, and she was trying to be her own person, and I think only through that making of food and that aspect was the only times I feel like they, in the novel, it's described as they really connected, which makes sense for then Erica, being a chef as well, which is great. When the story eventually shifts, and a lot of the second part of the story takes place on Okinawa, the description of that island and the people there, and how different it is to Tokyo, which is where Michiko grew up and experienced the end of the war, is so special and different. And then Erica herself makes a journey to Okinawa at the end of the novel as well, and seeing the descriptions and the feel for it from the mother and the daughter is really just great, and really a strong piece, I think, of the end of the novel, which kind of gets a little bit spiritual in that kind of, not in a kind of big way, very subtle, but it's Erica almost trying to shed the ghost of her mother and put the ghost of her mother to rest, and that's kind of really beautiful. It's really sad when I think when people, especially with a parent or a family member, and the relationship can never be solved if they pass away or something like that happens. And in her own way, Erica's going through that journey of going through the motions of laying things to rest in many regards, which is really powerfully done. I really recommend people, if you like a lot of emotion. It's very much character driven rather than plot, but I think that works for this type of novel. And I was pleasantly surprised by it. I didn't know what I was expecting when I picked it up as a surprise book, but I'm glad I did, as I really feel like it really takes you into a certain space, especially, and sometimes it can be a bit confusing, jumping timelines, jumping decades in time, and jumping countries from London to Japan to Hong Kong. but you never feel lost. And I think being anchored around these items that the mother owned, I think really helps get you into a frame of reference and a frame of mind when you go into each chapter and you're reading these dual narratives of mother and daughter. So I really, recommend it, and I hope you guys enjoy it if you do get a chance to read it, and I'll see you next time.